Hi there, Social 20-1, taking a look at source number 3 here. Our theme of the week has been war crimes, so I'll give you a few seconds to glance over the source, then I'll take it up with you. Okay, so a quote from Harry S. Truman, the American president who dropped the bomb, or two atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. So, when you take apart the source, I know it probably goes without saying, but what do they mean by the bomb? So take a look at the date. The bomb, he's talking about this in 1945. So the bomb would be this brand new weapon, this brand new technology. They've split the atom. They have unleashed uh, a nuclear holocaust. So what made this such a unique weapon for its time? I would establish that. And also establish that as of 1945, America is the only country with the bomb. And he goes on to say, we've used it to get back at those who attacked us without warning at Pearl Harbor. If you know your history, and we learned this too, Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack in 1941. Usually, countries declare war first and then invade. In this case, Japan didn't do that. They just invaded without a declaration of war, which, circumvents the code, I guess you could say. We've used it against those who have starved and beaten and executed American prisoners of war. And that is true. The Japanese were notorious for not abiding by what is called the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention was kind of an international code of conduct. This is how you treat prisoners of war. All countries that signed it would need to abide by it, but Japan didn't abide by the Geneva Convention. They were notorious for torturing and executing American prisoners of war. That is true. Uh, we've used it against those who have abandoned the international laws of warfare. In other words, killing civilians, torturing civilians, and so on. They've done this to shorten the agony of war. So America rationalized, in some ways using the bomb. They rationalized killing all those civilians by saying, it was necessary to shorten the war. We did this to save the lives of American soldiers. In other words, if they hadn't used the bomb to force Japan's surrender, they were going to have to land American troops on Japanese soil, Japan itself. And the thinking was that would cost hundreds of thousands, if not over a million American lives to conquer Japan that way. So when we read the source, it reads as a rationalization um, for America doing and what it did at the end of World War II when they dropped nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You need to talk about why Truman would think that he needs to rationalize this. And he would say that, I did this to save American lives. All of that is true from his perspective, but you only have to rationalize something if what you did people could construe as being wrong. So you need to establish in your interpretation what was wrong with dropping the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And what you need to point out is that the targets in those cases were civilian populations. Uh, the intent was, we're going to use total war to bring Japan to her knees and force surrender that way. The more civilians we kill, the more apt the government is to go ahead and just surrender without us having to land troops on Japanese soil and win the war that way, which would cost way more lives and cost way more money. So you've got to establish why Truman thinks he needs to defend what he did when he dropped the bomb. And you're going to point out total war and you're going to point out civilian casualties. I would also talk about the fact that, or the speculation that If America had lost World War II, they probably would have been on trial for crimes against humanity themselves for the civilian casualties that happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and as well as the fire bombings of Tokyo and other Japanese cities too. Probably as far as I would take the interpretation, when we link it to the course, clearly we see ultranationalism, in this case American ultranationalism, the fact that they resorted to total war to do this, maybe indoctrination, maybe they needed to indoctrinate the American public as part of this rationalization. And one has to wonder, did ethnocentrism play a role? I mean, after all, why not drop the nuclear bomb on Germany, on Berlin? So maybe there was a racial undertone to why they used it on Japan and not Western Europe, when that was also their enemy too. So maybe you could work in ethnocentrism from that perspective too. In terms of perspective, well, Truman means what he's saying. So Truman is embracing nationalism. In this case, he's embracing American nationalism. We had to do this. We had to do this to defend America, to protect American lives, innocence, etc., etc. So I think what you see is what you get from Truman. He means what he says. A full-on embracement of nationalism to defend your territory. That's probably all I would do with that source. While we're at it, we should do our relationships too. And I really hope you're following along and doing this as I record them online. Like, this is integral to social studies. You're going to be doing this for real on the diploma next year in grade 12. And this is how you're going to get through life. Like, this is going to give you the ability to look at the media, examine the media, TV, radio, Twitter, and so on, and critically analyze what that person is saying. What is that person really saying? Because how can you agree or disagree with something if you're not sure what they're even saying in the first place? This is going to make you a more informed global citizen. This is going to make you a more informed and responsible voter. Because in a couple of years, you are going to be voting. To me, and I'm biased because I'm a social studies teacher, to me, this is the most important skill you will get from high school. The ability to look at a source and figure out what that person is really saying. And if you can critically analyze sources, that is what will separate you from being a sheep and just going along with the crowd because that's what the media tells you to do. Okay, that's enough of my speech. Source one, this was from Tuesday. You probably forgot already. David Horsey talking about, uh, we got to be careful when we talk about war. World War II had a clear-cut good guy and a clear-cut bad guy, but war seldom is that clear-cut. Source two, America looking back at what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and questioning what they did, maybe realizing what they did for the first time. So for the longest time, America turned a blind eye. Barack Obama is changing that. He's owning up to it. He's recognizing what happened in America's past. And then, of course, the source from just today. So take a few seconds and see if you can figure out how we can link these. I've got an idea. To me, all three sources seem to be recognizing the consequences of ultranationalism. More specifically, the consequences of war crimes. They're exploring the concept of war crimes, crimes that you commit in the act of war, even though you are fighting a war. So source one is saying that, we can forgive war crimes in World War II, maybe, because there was a definite evil that the Allies were fighting. So again, you establish a concept, you link each source to that concept with an explanation. So source one is saying we can maybe forgive total war crimes in World War II. Definite bad guy, definite good guy, at least according to David Horsey. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's what he's saying. Source two is showing the recognition of America um, in what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So recognizing the guilt that maybe should go along with war crimes. The date's important. This is 2016. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were 1945. So it took America several decades to recognize what they had done and realize what they had done might have been wrong. And finally, just the source from today's source three, Truman completely rationalizing, defending what could deem to have been war crimes when we look back on history. But his was kind of written right at the time, 1945. So there's no benefit of hindsight. This is what Truman said to defend himself at that time. There is no, at this point, there was no going back and re-examining what America had done or what other countries had done. So right there, you've got two relationships. You've got your concept. You leak each source to the concept. If you stop right there, the most you can get in relationships is 60%. You need a third concept. And so when I look at them, I'm seeing this is the beginning. You know, source three is kind of the ground zero of the exploration of war crimes, at least according to our sources, because it happened in 1945, the date the atomic bomb was first used. And then source two is kind of a look back on that and then realizing, no, well, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we do need to recognize this, and maybe Truman was wrong in using the bomb. And then source one is more of a generalized perspective and look at war crimes. It's not specific to America, but war crimes in general. Maybe we can forgive World War II, but we've got to be careful about how we use that as a template for other wars, because history isn't always that clear cut. Might be as far as I take it. I wish we were in class because I want to hear what you think. Yours are better than mine usually. Um, I'm sorry we're not in class. Okay, hope you got something out of that. Thanks for paying attention.